president of the Historical Society of Cecil County, and we are doing this video to document a rare accession from a gentleman that called us out of the blue, and we wanted to get this all on record so that it'll be in our archive for years to come.
Okay.
So I'd like to introduce, you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Barry Sawyer. I live up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Lancaster County. I have a profound interest in history. I've had the privilege over my 70-plus years of restoring, preserving 4 antique homes. And it's a pleasure for me to be here at the Cecil Historical County Society. You want me to?
Well,
You asked.
yes. So this all started out with a phone call to the society. You were asking if we would be interested in receiving this collection. So why don't you tell us how you came to acquire all of this?
I'd be delighted to. I documented exactly, to answer your question, and also to put in the archives of the Society, outlining and remembering my friend Lindsay Price. I'm going to refer to my notes here because it tells from beginning to end how I acquired this collection. And it does take us back to early years of vacationing over at Crystal Beach. My family vacationed there during the 30s and the 40s, right up to the 50s. And at the time when I became involved, I was maybe 12, 13, 14, and we would, on Sunday, we would leave the cottage and we would come up and worship at Old St. Stephen's. And of course, as we also, a little sideline, is we would go and get our mail at Earlville.
Mm-hmm.
That was the post office.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time in the 50s, I remember a rather dark building, clapboard built, and we'd always look for Mrs. Lawler. Mrs. Lawler was always very kind. She would remember us, and she was very, very helpful. But that's just a little sidebar there. But we would then worship over at St. Stephen's. And one Sunday, this gentleman came over, and he had, and I'm about 12 or 13, this man came over, Mr. Lindsey Price, and he had this snow white beard, very impressive to a young boy, and he wanted to know where we were from. And we told him we were from Lancaster. Now I think Mr. Price would approve of me telling you this encounter and the importance of Mr. Price. And he came over and he said, "Where do you come from?" And we told him from Lancaster. And when he heard Lancaster, he smiled. He said, "Lancaster saved and restored my life." What do you mean? What? Well, he said, for 30, 40 years, I couldn't talk. And he said, I discovered the Lancaster Cleft Palate Clinic. And that was founded by Dr. Herbert Cooper. And he said, after all those years, I learned to talk. And they do put you through an extensive therapy sessions. Once the surgery is done, you have to learn to speak. You have all over again, you know. And of course he couldn't. So that opens a lot of questions regarding Mr. Price. What his early life was like, we don't know. His family could probably shed some light on that. But to the best of my knowledge, he was a farmer. And he was a historian, because he gleefully took us through the church. He took us out, explained the cemetery, the people that were buried there, and the history of them. And then he said, come. He said, follow me, follow me. And we thought, what's going on? And it was just probably the four of us, my mother and dad, and my brother and I. And he said, come up here. And he took us up to the altar. And he knelt down behind the altar, and rattling old boards and whatever, it sounded like sliding this and that, he pulled out this velvet bag and he laid it on the altar. And he opened it up and he said, here's the original silver chalice, and I'm not sure if you call it the teller or what, the communion set that was sent over by the King and Queen of England when this parish was founded. And I think that goes back to 1600, Old St. Stephen's. Well, as a kid, I just was captivated with his knowledge and with his interest. And then sometime during the time, maybe we saw him, I know we saw him again, he showed us and pointed to his farm across the street over there. I guess now it's called the old Crystal Beach Road or whatever. And he pointed and said, my farm's right over there. And with that in mind, and I have pictures of myself with Mr. Price because he came to visit us, and my mother dated these 1957 down at Crystal Beach.
Okay.
And I came home from school, and my mother said, a small package arrived for you. And of course I was excited. As a kid, that was special to receive a package. We didn't have FedEx at that time, and of course it came through the mail. I opened this box, and in the box, I have added since, but here was the first set of arrowheads, and he had them dated. And he says, these stones are what we call early archaic. They're before 3000 BC. 3000 BC. They were found. Everything that I have was found on Mr. Price's farm. Well, I was ecstatic. And of course, this went on over a period of time. Another box came, and as a kid, oh, look at the size. Look at this. Look how big it is. My gosh, it must have been a spear or a knife. So, you know, you could see how exciting it was for a young boy. And this was late archaic, 3000 BC to 1000 BC.
Did he also send arrowheads to your brother?
No.
Just to you?
No, he just sent them to me. I don't know. My brother was interested, but he was, at that time, he was in another world getting ready for college, and he was older, and he did meet Mr. Price, and but yes, that's an excellent question, but he didn't, you know, he wasn't as involved, and Mr. Price and I sort of, we hit it off together, and so I would always show my brother everything, and he was excited too, but he was in another phase of his life. So as you go down through this box, each one is dated, and as the artist became more skilled and as the generation improved, it culminated it went from, I'll give you the names, I won't take you through all of them, but you go from early archaic, before 3000, late archaic, 3 to 1000 BC. We move forward, you're going to see and find stonework that has tiny little teeth, serrated edge. And one of my favorites comes from the Middle Woodland period, which is 500 to 800 AD. And that has tiny little teeth. And it's much finer than the rough earlier pieces.
So how did Mr. Price know how to date these?
Excellent question. I was concerned about that too. And not too long after, I also received a stone axe, which I was fascinated with. He found a stone axe. And he had a piece of, he said, I'm not sure if he gave it to me by mail or in one of my visits, but he gave me this particular chart. And this chart is what he used and how he categorized his collection. Now, as a child, I wasn't as concerned. I was more interested in how they looked, and I could easily see, for instance, how he would take a particular stone that he found and put it up against. And sure enough, there is a stone with a point at each end. And that column, that is listed as early archaic before 3000. Now, this gentleman, this was a I think it's a 54, I'm not sure. The article, August the 29th, 1954. Now, I've had this for over 60 years, and you can see how deteriorated it is. But thanks to the Baltimore Sun, the librarian, Mr. Paul McCardle, he drew up the actual article. And the society has the actual article that you can print and print a new copy, and you can reference it. The gentleman that wrote this is a gentleman by the name of James H. Brady. And I was told by Mr. McCardle that he recently passed, and of course this is the 25th of February 25th, 21. And he said that Mr. Brady was a 50-year employee, recently passed away. This gentleman, who is the archaeologist, T. Latimer Ford, trying to determine, he has, according to Mr. McCardle, he thinks that he passed in 93. We're not sure. But we did find the obituary for his wife. But this gentleman is responsible for dating all of this. I would have loved to have met him. Mr. Price, I don't think met him, but in here, in this article, Mr. Ford, Latimer Ford, is involved in several digs. Now that leads me to the question to Mr. Price, why me? Why are you sending these to me? And I remember, now I have to think back, but I'm sure he said because of your interest. But I remember one thing he said, I do not want them digging up my farm. So we just let that pass, and we just accepted that as a reason.
So for how many years did he send you?
Well, he sent those. Now keep in mind, I figured in this picture, Mr. Price was born in 1885. And in this picture, this was taken in 1957. And he would have been 72 maybe. And so he sent the collection, I think it was over a year, maybe a year and a half to 2 years.
Did he ever express to you that he wanted them to stay in Cecil County, or he just...
No, he didn't. He didn't mention that. And he was, but you can see from his efforts that he not only just collected, but he would take the time. He would take the time to clean them, categorize them. He wasn't satisfied just to throw them in a box. Now he probably, as he would over many years, he probably did just what I said. He probably did put them somewhere and collect them. But then when this article came out, then he realized, I can do something with these. I can determine, and especially he was interested in the early inhabitants, the ancestry of his farm. Who was on his farm and who lived there?
Had he lived on that farm all his life?
That the Price family might be able to say, but I think one of your curator researchers, Lisa, I think Lisa discovered that in the 1850 map.
And the map right there beside you.
Oh, very good.
No.
On this map, if you find St. Stephen's, the Elk River, and then here's the back creek, and is the church on here?
Yes.
The church is on here at Snow Hill, and I'm sure that the Price family is on here. Is that right?
Yes.
I'm not taking time
Yes.
to taking time now.
So
to-
did he live alone?
Yes, yes. He lived alone, and best of my knowledge, Mr. Price lived alone. At least he lived alone during the time that I knew him. How long, I don't know. But we were just discussing the Cecil County map back in the 1800s, 1858 map. You have the St. Stephen's Episcopal Church, and right across the street is the Price farm. So, excuse me, I would assume that he was definitely the descendant to live on the farm. And I had the privilege of visiting him one summer while down at the cottage, and we always rented the same cottage, and somehow made arrangements. And I don't know if he drove. I think I would have a recollection of that, but I don't know how I got there. I think my parents dropped me off. And you think back at that time, you know, that was just a wonderful period. And he was so happy to have me. He took me and showed me the old house. I remember seeing that. And of course that, as I say in my remembrance, that was probably the prelude. That was probably the prelude of to my history and my appreciation for antique homes. And I remember inside, he had some beautiful old antique furniture, outhouse, no interior plumbing that I remember. And I remember a Victrola. He took me over and he wound the Victrola to play some music, and of course I had to get a Victrola, and I have one in my house, and every New Year's Eve I play it for everyone. So he planted seeds in me for history, and he took me outside, and I remember this. I don't remember a big barn. I don't remember that because I come from farm country, up the Amish farms, but I don't remember that. But I remember a long utility shed, and I remember it open. And under it, I think were tractors and implements, you know, farm equipment. And along the wall, he had his rakes hanging. And he's showing me all this, and I looked up, and hanging on the rakes was a big, long black snake. Oh my gosh, I was terrified. And he looked down at me and he said, "You don't bother him. You don't bother him. He comes back every year and he takes care of the rodents." I remember that because in where I grew up in a nice suburban home up in Lancaster, any snake was unwelcome. But yep, he had a reason. And I think now I would love to talk to him again now that I'm older. I didn't see a barn. And maybe that had something to do with his next statement. And he said to me, there's one thing that I fear the most. And I looked up and I said, what? He said, wind and fire. And I didn't think too much about it until later in life when I had an experience with a fire and high wind. It is to be feared, that is for sure. Through the years then, we would visit. I remember my parents, we went down at Christmas, in the dead of winter. And we went down to visit him. And I don't know if we caught him off guard or, because I don't know if you could call him. I don't know how that was. I was a kid, but I remember going. And he was excited. My mother had done some needlepoint, and she took some woolen sweaters and whatnot for him. So anyway, that's just a little background on our relationship with him. And then, of course, as I moved on to high school and got older, I did take the collection, and I remember they asked the students, do you have a hobby you'd like to? So I took Mr. Price's collection and I showed how to categorize the different periods, and I remember doing that. And then as I grew up, and of course I was inducted into the service during the Vietnam era, that was in 1965, and that's the year Mr. Price passed away at the age of 80. I was telling the staff here, it's a foggy remembrance, but I know it happened that we did visit him at someone else's house, and it was in the country, because I remember a long picket fence, and Mr. Price and an elderly lady came out and to talk to us. We didn't go in, but we talked to him, and I think that would have been right before I was drafted, and maybe before he passed away. But I think he reached a point where he had to leave the farm for some medical attention, and So, but yes, all of the stonework was found on his farm. Now I don't know when he stopped. Keep in mind, he was in his 70s. I'm sure he collected this when he was an active farmer. So whether...
Was there any livestock on the farm?
I don't remember that. I don't remember that. No, and I would remember that. There wasn't a dog. I'm a dog lover. I have a dog. A dog didn't greet me. I remember that. But the snake greeted me, so I remember the snake.
Well, it's clear you treasured those things because that's a handsome case.
Well, that was made, this case was made by my grandfather. He saw, I was very proud, and it still am, I'm very proud of the collection. And he said, well, you need something to display, because I just had them in boxes. And my dad came home one day and he said, your grandpa is making a case for you. I do want to comment on this because the stones as dated go from the oldest to the newest. And this particular case would be, this was the late woodland period. And you can find that on the chart. They're just a basic triangle. But you can see how they go. They go from something crude, rather crude, but you can see the shape, to something that's very fine, that you can actually, it's almost paper thin. And I do know that Mr. Price was very careful. There are many of these. I have a drawer of just pieces. But he had to hunt until he found one that was perfect like this. But you can see the skill coming down through the generations and through the years of the Maryland inhabitants pre-Columbus. I think they're referred to in the article. And I would encourage anyone interested, the Society does have a readable copy of this complete article. And it gives you a good impression of who was on the soil, who was here in Maryland long before, our present inhabitants. But you can see how skilled they became. And this almost looks like it's machine made, and it was perfect. So this drawer represents the late woodland 800 to 1500. So what was going on in our world in the 1500s? Now you go back to England, the queens and the English history during the 1500s, and here the inhabitants were making these over here in the Americas.
So what made you to decide to donate this collection at this time?
Well, as I said, I've had this collection now for 60 plus years. And I was looking at this, and I told the staff, I live right next to what is known as the Landis Valley Farm Museum up in Pennsylvania. I live right next door. I can look over and see the buildings. This collection doesn't belong there. This collection belongs where it was found. And many times we have an antique center up near us, the Black Angus. Tourists come from all over the eastern coast to stop there at the antique center, and you can actually purchase arrowheads, and somebody maybe will put them on a little cardboard, and but they were just arrowheads. They were just found, and I thought, no, these points, and in my other box are scrapers, hide scrapers. You always look for how it was held, a positioning for the thumb. All of it was found right here in Cecil County, across from St. Stephen's Church. And my first call went, or inquiry, not a call, I did inquire as to the Maryland Academy of Sciences. And I got into that whole website. I could have hunted, I could have searched further, but it just was a bit overwhelming, and I couldn't find. I did ask someone. I thought, if anyone answers, I'm going to ask for T. Latimer Ford, and they'll probably say, who is that? So I didn't pursue that. Then I thought about, this all happened within a very short period, within an hour's time, and I thought, Cecil County, I wonder if Cecil County has anything. And I found this wonderful, wonderful organization, the Historical Society of Cecil County. I think it's since 1932,
Correct.
And I think that was exciting. I thought, well, I'm going to give it a try. They belong in Cecil County because I can tell them where they were found, and I have them documented to a gentleman that lived there. And so I called, and I received this call from a lovely, lovely lady, a lovely gal, Lisa Dolor.
Delore, yeah.
Delore.
She's our curator.
And I spun this story to her, and I actually spun it to her while I was sitting out at Costco parking lot, because I had tried to call earlier and no one was there, of course. So she listened to my whole story, and I said, but you wait. She said, it sounds interesting. But I said, don't make a decision until I send you pictures. And so I went right to my studio and I photographed every drawer. And I sent them to her. And she said that they would be delighted to have them. And I just was so excited because they belong here. Mr. Price would belong here. He would be here. He would visit. Now I don't know why he didn't think of you, because you were in existence in 1932. I don't know, when I think of Mr. Price and how kind and generous he was to us, and he was, I'm about to say, I don't know how social he was, and yet that's answered by the fact that he came over to us at church, introduced himself. So, but I don't know how, those were different times. So I don't know,
Different.
It was different. I don't know how much he knew about this. I do know he said, he read this article, and he said, I don't want them. I think he was looking for a source, someone that would be interested in them and that would take care of them. I don't know if he thought that young lad would keep them for 65 years, but I kept them, and I would occasionally get them out and show them. Certain people who were interested, other people I'd said, you want to see my class? They weren't interested, but they were important to me. And also the fact, and what's interesting in this article is that in 1954, Mr. Ford is referencing the fact that Maryland is behind in its archaeology of the early inhabitants, and he's pushing that we need to. And he mentions Pennsylvania, he mentions Virginia. Where he mentioned several sites where they are digging presently, and he said we need to find out more about our early inhabitants in Cecil County and in Maryland, and that leads me to what I say in this collection, that Lindsey Price was one of Cecil County's first turn of the 20th century amateur archaeologists. He didn't just collect, he cleaned, and he sorted, and he categorized as best he could. He loved history and had a profound appreciation for Maryland's first inhabitants. Hats off and kudos to my friend Lindsey Price.
Well, I think Mr. Price made a very wise decision when he picked you to receive all of these artifacts. And the day you called, after Lisa got off the phone, that created quite a discussion. But there was never a moment's hesitation that we didn't want this collection, and we are so very appreciative.
That means he would be very, very pleased. I know he would. I know he would be.